Hi, I'm Ed Parcaut, your host of Inner Edison. What I'd like you to take away from today's show is our greatest growth comes from our greatest failures. I will bring you guests that will help you on your journey and advise you to avoid some of those failures, like the guest we have today, which is Brian Galke. Let's welcome him and get to know his story. How you doing, Brian?
Doing excellent. How are you doing today, Ed?
You know, work-wise, great. You know, there's always something. You never know what's going to happen, right?
Keeps life interesting.
Yeah, but the one thing I did like was getting to know you in San Diego.
Right.
Because what you have to offer, I mean, I was surprised because you did a live, I think, with Steve Sims, and I missed it, right? And then he was talking about, hey, I got, we're going to have this guy doing facial recognition stuff. I thought it was going to be about software and how they check you out. I didn't know it was going to be about how to understand a person by their facial features.
Yes. So it's funny. I've gone through several evolutions of the name. So it started with learn to read faces, but then people came out and said, oh, can you read palms as well? I'm like, no. So then I did facialfeaturerecognition.com, and people were like, oh, well, how can I buy your software? I'm like, no, that doesn't work. So I finally went with subtle skills, because in addition to teaching how to understand and analyze people by their faces, there's lots of other little tips and tricks that I teach people as well.
All right. Before we get into all that, I want people to understand how this has helped you, where you came from.
Absolutely.
Who you are, we've talked about that. We know that. I know that, but let's let all our listeners know that.
Sure. So I am the biggest introverted extrovert you will ever meaning I love to be around people, but I was always terrified to be around people at the exact same time. So you talk about like a wallflower or somebody who wants to be there, but didn't feel comfortable being around people at the exact same time. That was me. And like any good introvert, what do? You pick up a bunch of books. So I picked up books on NLP. And so I learned about mirroring and matching, but that is a reactive skill. I picked up books about body language, and I think everyone should read body language books. So two of my favorites are What Every Body Is Saying by Joe Navarro is number one. And that one's to learn about other people's body language. And then after you've read and mastered that book, then you should pick up You Say More Than You Think by Janine Driver. And she's the New York best-selling author on body language. And so hers is more about examining your own body language. So all those books were great, but those were all reactive skills that I could kind of understand people, but I was still stuck in my own head. And then in 2011, I went, and I was actually supposed to meet a friend who was in town for dinner. And I'm at the restaurant. She's like, hey, I'm not going to make it. And I got into a pissy mood about it. And she's like, no, you have to come meet this person. I'm like, no, you stood me up for dinner. I'm not going to go. That is one of those times in life where by taking an opportunity to go and meet this person, it forever changed my life. So I met Mac Fulfer, and he has a book called Amazing Face Reading. And I walked down, I'm like, what? You're talking crazy. And he read my face, and instantly I was hooked. So he talked about my eyebrows, my eyes, my ears. And then he relayed how all these features impact how you take in information and how you process information. So I can look back to 2011 and point out the trajectory of my life changed both personally and professionally after I learned to understand people based on their facial features. So I went all the way from being on the help desk, because what better job for an introvert, right, is when people have to call in and talk to you. And then socially, I would go out, but I was literally stuck in the prison of my own mind because I was overthinking every single situation. But once I learned to start looking at people's faces, the time and attention was spent on them. And because I'm focusing on somebody else, it shut up the what you say and think in your own head. So I went from introvert to extrovert because of that one feature. I literally, if somebody say, what's the one thing that changed your life? It was learning to analyze people's faces.
And I will attest to the fact that I did make you go talk to somebody in the middle of a bar that, I tried to find the one person you couldn't get to talk to, and you did an amazing job getting to them. This works. And because I know a lot of, other people I've talked to, they're like, that's so hokey. And then they're like, oh my God, it works. It's so amazing. Yeah. I was using it the other day on this, and that's why I wanted you to be on Inner Edison, because a lot of people, entrepreneurs, whatever, when they're going to go meet somebody or talk to somebody, it would be nice to know about that person besides what you read, but understand who they are, that you won't get into their bio.
Absolutely. Right. So when I was on a part of what we used to call the presentation team, me and two other people were flown around the United States to go do presentations for any client over $1 million. And I could do everything else in the hotel room. I could test the software. I could double check my PowerPoint. I could make sure that exactly what I wanted to demo, but people were always the unknown. And what I found is because I could go in ahead of time and look at LinkedIn or go to the About Me page of the organization, I had an idea of what the people look like. And most recently at the speakeasy event, I didn't know anybody because I had done the one AMA with Steve, but I followed the Facebook group. And as people like Matt and Lindy and everybody else were starting to say, hey, we're so excited about coming, I started analyzing their faces. So when I walked in, I could walk into conversations with them immediately. And when I left, they'd say, God, I feel like I've met you somewhere before. And that's because I felt so comfortable with them. It was walking in thinking, these are my friends. I already know them a little bit. And that's what helped put me at ease. So this is the life-changing part for me about this skill is it's something you could do proactively and not reactively like body language, which again, I still think is important, but this is what changed my life.
Let me uncross my arms.
Yeah, exactly.
Because in sales, when I've been in sales my whole life, yes,
Right.
I'm in the mortgage industry. It was different in the beginning. I mean, you had to learn about objections, features, benefits, all that stuff. And then you learned about what people were telling you by sitting there. And so this is very important stuff that most people go, but I don't need it. I'm not in sales. You're in sales. You sell your kid not to run across the road. You sell your, you know, I mean, it's amazing that what we could use this for. Even we talked about dating and other people you could, you know, to talk to girls or talk to boys or whatever it is, or whatever it is for you.
Absolutely. And that's, so when you look at it, it's just learning how to interact better with somebody else. And we all interact with somebody. And the best part is everybody we interact with has a face, right? And so I reference the book, The 5 Love Languages, because a lot of people have read that. And the whole point of the 5 love languages is I want to learn what the other person's language is, not what's my language. And what's funny about people is the way that the way that we feel love can be a different language from how we express love. And people, it's the exact same thing. Once you're learning to read somebody's face, it tells you a little bit about how do they process information, but also all kinds of things. Are they more visual? Are they more auditory? So the entire premise is about learning to understand the other person so you can build rapport with them instead of just only wanting to think about how I prefer things or how I want to say things.
You know, I brought this up to my wife. First thing she said was, we're biology, right?
Yes.
We are who we are because of biology.
You're right. And she's partially correct. We are genetically coded on our hereditary side, right? A combination of our mother's side, our parents' side. And so that's the genetics that we inherit. But then there's epigenetics. So epigenetics is what happens to you over time. And there's 42 muscles in the face. The mind creates movement. Movement creates muscle. And that's why when you see somebody who goes to the gym who only does the upper body, right, and they've got little tiny legs, you don't go, well, that's just genetics. No, it's the muscles that they moved created that large upper body, and then they didn't do legs, and that's why they got little tiny legs. So your wife's partially correct. There's the genetic side that we all inherit. It's the epigenetics of what happened to us is a reflection of how our face contorts over time. So I show in some of my presentations, I think I showed to you guys, a picture of me at 17 versus me at 37. Well, at 17, I had very straight eyebrows. I didn't have the angled ones that you see now, and we'll show you a little bit about what that means. But because guys don't go and get their eyebrow shapes changed, right? And then there's differences in my lips. There's differences in the angles of my eyes, my ears, you name it. So our faces evolve based on what we experience, and that's where the epigenetics comes in.
That's not just gravity.
No, well, that gravity is a factor. It is definitely a factor. But,
yeah, I mean, because that's one, and I think I read one of the things, why do women mess with their lips and their eyebrows and all the other stuff, you know, because there is things that women do or now I know guys do it too, but, you know, they adjust certain things, but they still will be pretty close even with their adjustments, right?
Correct. So you wouldn't go in, for example, if you had straight eyebrows, you wouldn't go in and suddenly say, now I want angled eyebrows or now I want rounded eyebrows. Now, what women have always had the advantage of or have always taken on the persona of handling is making adjustments to their features for attraction purposes. So women used to put belladonna in their eye to make their pupils grow because wider pupils were attracted to. And that's why women wear lipstick, right? It's to highlight lips. And that's one of the things that we teach about is why is our lip injection so popular right now? And it's because this is your personal, or your upper lip is your personal lip. And so women highlight that. So red lipstick has always been seen as a sexy, attractive feature on women. Women can also take, I think it's called rouge or blush or whatever, and they can make their cheekbones look wider than they actually are. So there's all kinds of ways to highlight features that we can do. So I always tell them, matter of fact, the way that Steve and I ended up on AMA and going to Steve's event was because I told Steve, like, I always trim this so that you can see my upper lip. And that's because it's your personal lip. And when people can see it, they feel like they know you a little bit better. And Steve's grows his that covers up his lip. And that's the conversation that started between Steve and I.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I want to go back to, I can't believe women put that in their eye, because talk about if they walk outside, they get blinded, right?
Yeah. And then eventually they were actually poisoning their own bodies just by trying to make the pupil larger because it was seen as more attractive.
That's, you know, come on, let's move on. There's other things you can make bigger to make it more attractive.
Look, doctors used to prescribe cigarettes, right? Like, oh, hey, go have a pack of cigarettes. So it's things that we've learned in time to look back and go, oof, not the best idea of something to do.
Okay. So you want to kind of get into what you're talking about, or is there anything else you want to add to before we get into that?
The number one thing is people think that this takes 10,000 hours to master, and it doesn't. I'm going to show you something today, and we're going to talk about it. Even if you just learn eyebrows, which we're going to cover in a second, and I'll show a PowerPoint on it too, will change your life. Because when you start looking at somebody's eyebrows, the next logical thing, if I'm looking at an eyebrow, is to go and make eye contact. And that's the number one reason I give the cheat sheet and everything else about eyebrows is if you do that one feature, and even if you get it wrong, if you just look at somebody and think, gosh, what kind of eyebrows do they have? Eye contact is next. And when you have eye contact, people feel seen. And that's what starts the rapport building in the relationship. So
women should start telling the guys to start looking at their eyebrows instead of where they're looking.
That's right. Instead of my eyes are up here, my eyebrows are up here. 100%.
There's your new shirt for your thing.
That's right. Hey, my eyebrows are up here.
Yeah. See, you've got to have fun on here. Otherwise, why do it? Right?
Yes. 100%.
All right. So you want me to bring that up? So if you're listening to this on Audible and the other places you're listening to, we'll do the best to describe it. But if you want to go check it out on YouTube for Inner Edison, it's on my Facebook. Hello, my YouTube channel at Parcaut. It's one of those days, man. We always make mistakes. There you go.
Sure. So what we're going to be discussing today is just a few of my favorite features, and they're the most practical ones because they're ones that are easy to see. So what you'll see on the first screen, if you're looking here, I do have a dating class, which you brought up earlier. It's called Looking for Love in All the Wrong Faces, because so many people were coming to me asking like, well, what does this space say? What does that space say? So rather than looking at just, is somebody hot or not? It's what can you tell about a person based on their facial features? What do you have in common with them, and where will you have some strife? So with that being talked about, what we'll start with is my favorite part is, what is it about facial analysis that's so important? And that is, it's the only proactive skill. Like I mentioned before, having been part of a demonstration team flown around the nation, I always wanted to double check everything ahead of time, but people were always the unknown. And once it gave me the ability to go and look at somebody's face, I could actually change the message of what do I want to say to how would it best be understood by them. And that's why I took Steve Sims' quote here that says, the message you give out is only as good as it's received, because that's a key thing. There's a lot of things that are said, but what's heard is the most important part. And then the next part that we'll go into, again, my favorite part is I love to teach eyebrows. Why? Because everybody has eyebrows. If you go look at my Instagram, it's subtleskills.com or subtle skills on Instagram. I actually put up a picture of celebrities without eyebrows the other day. And it is disturbing because you don't recognize them. And so you start to really look at how important eyebrows are. So I like to start with that. There's three basic shapes with eyebrows. So there is rounded, there's angled, and there's straight eyebrows. So when you start looking at someone, an important thing to know is there's actually two sides to everybody's face. There is the personal side and there's the professional side. So if I ask you, hey, are you married? That's a personal question. So in the US, we wear wedding rings on our left hand. So this side of your face is your personal side. This side of your face, or the right side, is your professional side. So you can have different eyebrows on each side, but they'll all have these three basic shapes. So the first one is the rounded eyebrow. They love to think about the people around them. So these are the people that put everyone else first. Like, so if you're going to talk to somebody and they have rounded eyebrows, then, hey, tell me about your friends, your family, or tell me if it's on the business side, tell me about your coworkers. And then you bring it back to the actual person, because if you start asking them direct questions, they don't know how to deal with it. And it's kind of like crossing a boundary with them because they don't think about themselves first. So when I go in somewhere and I see those rounded eyebrows, oh, hey, tell me where you're from. Do you have any siblings? Do you have any kids? Ask about the people around them in their life. The next one over is the angled eyebrow. So this is one that I have, and it's the polar opposite. These are people who help me understand it. What's my angle? Help me understand it so I can then help other people. So these lovely angled eyebrows that I have now, I got once I became a corporate trainer, because I had to learn the material and regurgitate so that people could understand it. And literally over time, I started to develop those angled eyebrows. So when you see it, rounded is think about the people around them. Then the angled one is, hey, what's my angle? Help them understand it so they can then help other people.
See, now I thought that was what's in it for me. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty much the same thing. You're right. And so,
yeah, but that sounds bad. Yours sound better.
Yeah. The third one is get straight to the point. So when you see straight eyebrows, then you go, okay, give them the most important facts, figures, and data, and then just stop and let them ask questions. Because the longer you talk, the more you kind of bother them. So if I was doing it in a sales capacity, I'd say, here's what it costs. Here's what it is. Here's the terms with it. And I would just shut up. If you're doing it on a personal level, and I want to tell a story, and I like to tell long-winded stories at times, I know somebody with straight eyebrows gets bored easily and wants to move on. So I shorten that story because I know they want me to get to the point that much faster. Does that make sense?
Yes, very much so.
So those are the three eyebrows. So rounded thinks about the people around them. Angled, what's my angle? And straight, get straight to the point. Once you learn to start doing this, it just changes your life. All
right, so let's go back. So the rounded is easy, the straight's easy. Let's talk about the angle. So it's not necessary. So when you're talking to somebody with an angled eyebrow, basically you want to exactly do what?
Help them understand it first, and then focus on other people. So they're yeah, it's a total 180 from the rounded eyebrow. Right, okay. Rounded eyebrow. Let's say that. Let's use real estate since you're in the mortgage industry, right? So if you talk about rounded eyebrows, oh, who are you going to have over at your house? Who's going to come visit you? You know, you're talking about the people that are going to come and the people around them. Tell me, let's say I'm talking to the spouse. Tell me what, you know, your husband is looking for in a house, because they always think about everybody else first. Versus if it's an angled eyebrow, it's, oh, so are you a big cook? Are you wanting to be the chef in the kitchen? Is the pool what's important to you? You ask them direct questions of what's important to them. And then you can say, oh, so it'll be an entertain. So you're going to be cooking here in your kitchen for other people. So you start with them when it's an angled point. You start with others when it's rounded. Make sense?
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then the straight is, here's your payment. Here's for the loan. And you're done. Exactly.
What's the square footage of the house? What's the taxes? You know, how many days has it been on the market? What's the cost? Get straight to the point with everything for them. Absolutely.
There's your eyebrows.
There you go. So example, like for people who are looking on the screen, there's 3 different eyebrows here. So there's a picture of a lady who has rounded eyebrows. So if you see those rounded eyebrows, what are you going to ask her? Hey, what about the people around them? Then the gentleman in the center, he's got straight eyebrows, get straight to the point. And then you see somebody who has angled eyebrows, so help them understand it. What's their angle? So
are they always so angry with angled eyebrows?
The funny thing, we have been
taught. That's a pic. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry. The picture he has shows somebody. He looks like he's really up. Like, what are you talking to me for?
Exactly. Right? And the funny thing is, he's got a bigger lower lip, and sometimes, like, we'll get to lips in a second. The eyebrows are just helping them understand it. Now, when people furrow their brow and they squint, then yes, okay, that's a bad thing. But this is at a resting rate when they have it. And the funny thing is, there's pictures I have in my training course where there's a lady who's sitting there and she's got a big smile, but she has flat eyelids that are very straight, which means you just flatline. And she's got something in front of her that she's using as a barrier. So we've been taught to always smile, to kind of like when we're uncomfortable and everything, because we think we're throwing other people off. But there's so many other things beyond the smile that you need to take a look at. Like, do they cross their arms? Did they create a barrier between you and them? And so there's so much more than a smile. But you're right. When we first see angled objects of any type, we automatically think, ooh, is it something I need to watch out for? So if I were to say, hey, would you rather pet a bulldog or Doberman Pinscher? You're going to pet the bulldog, right? Because it's rounded features. And we worry a little bit about angled features like on a Doberman dog.
Oh, really? So I'd pet the Doberman first.
Well, you're a little more unique in that way. Most people would be scared.
No, I've been around Dobermans my whole life. My grandfather had them. So
there you go. So next feature over is eyelids. So what do eyelids tell you about people? 2 things about it is it tells you how they want to spend their time. And there's 2 different types of eyelids. So the first one is when there's a heavy eyelid. So like if you think of Bambi, or you see a lot of eyelid in their upper lid, those are people who think in terms of we. So I like to rhyme because I was raised in the time of Dr. Seuss. So the more lid you see, the more we think in terms of we. And then the less lid, there's more I. So they think in terms of I. So if you're dealing with those 2 types of people, if you see somebody who's got a very full lid, hey, where are we going? What are we going to go do later? You know, let's make plans to get together. If you see somebody that has very little eyelid and a lot of I, then, let them run free, and they're happy to do things solo. So for example, I travel, I will sit at a bar because I just like going somewhere by myself. And then if somebody wants to come and talk to me, it's a bonus, but it's not a requirement. So I was in a previous relationship where somebody had a lot of eyelid and I had very little. And so she would always say, where are we going? What are we doing? And we had to sit down and have the conversation because we had to adjust to each other. So because I have no eyelid, I would have to go out of my way to think, okay, don't just think about what I want to do, but stop and ask like, hey, where do we want to do this weekend? Where are we going to go? And conversely, we had to have the conversation. Sometimes you just have to let me go do things by myself, and it's nothing on you. It's just what makes me happy. So when you see the different people, literally, that's a big one. Like people are like, oh God, you should be a marriage counselor on this. I'm like, this is what your eyes are telling me.
Now, before we can move on, now the thin eyelid, does that normally have a angled eyebrow or a round eyebrow, or it could have any of them?
Can have any of them. Every single feature can be completely separate. And kind of like we talked about earlier, the left side of your face is your personal side. The right side is your professional side. Now, the only thing I haven't seen is usually you'll have full lids on both sides or thin lids on both sides. I've never seen somebody who's like Droopy the dog on one side with a big eyelid and then nothing on the other one.
Well, it would just make sense if it's about then they would have round eyebrows because it's about everybody else, right? You would think that.
Yes. So you're right. And there's a lot of the time. So for example, there was somebody at Speakeasy that I got up, like I said, I'm an introverted extrovert. I got nervous. So what I did as a speaker is I started looking around the crowd for who has rounded eyebrows, because I know they're there to support me because they're always thinking about other people. And what did they have? The biggest smiles and nodding yes to encourage you on. So that's another way you can use it. Yeah.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah. No, I love questions. I can geek out about this. I know the time we have here, I can talk for hours about every single feature and like who has it, what are examples of celebrities, because it's just reinforcement. And I love this. This is the subject that I could just talk for days and days about. So,
okay. Well, you don't have days. Get moving.
Exactly. So for people looking on the screen here, you see two different things. And this is a kind of example of what we were talking about earlier. Now they both happen to have rounded eyebrows in the picture here. So there's a gentleman and there's a lady. And what they have though, is he has the fuller eyelid. So he's the one who thinks, oh, in terms of we, and she has very little eyelid. So she thinks in terms of me or I. And so if these two people were working together, a lot of people assume, oh, well, she's got rounded eyebrows, so she must be the one who thinks we all the time. No, she does put other people first, but she has very little lid. So she's thinking like, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And he's the one who has both rounded eyebrows and a fuller upper lid. So where are we going? What are we going to go do?
So basically she's more well-rounded is what you're saying.
She is, in that she can do things. She can think about other people first, and then she'll think about herself.
Right. But I'm saying she's not always put everybody else first where she doesn't get to do anything. Where 100%. He's putting everybody else first and then like, okay, well, I'm okay with us going there.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up an excellent point. So I literally, and it was an uncomfortable situation at first until I learned to value it, because it was somebody being real and honest with me. And that was, I was doing a kickoff for a 2020 kickoff right before the lockdown and everything else at a corporation. And I was teaching it, and then I would read each individual's people, if they volunteered, their faces. So people always come up afterwards and I said, we want to know about her, our coworker. And she had these beautiful rounded eyebrows. She had very full lids. And then she had this one line that was right here that's super deep. And that's a verbal affirmation.
On his chin, by the way, he's talking about right
on
his
his
chin.
Yeah, in between the
lower lip, right before the edge of the chin.
Yes. If there's a deep line right there, that's called the verbal affirmation line. And what I said is, hey, look, you're so busy doing all these things for everybody else, and you're always thinking we, and nobody knows all the things that you're doing. You have this deep line right here below your lower lip and above your chin, and that's a verbal affirmation line. And if you have to let people know the things that you're doing, and that this line means you just want a sincere thank you every once in a while. And she burst into tears, and I immediately stepped back, right? Because that's my body language training, is when somebody is upset, make sure you're not the cause. So I stepped back, and she said, I'm so busy doing something for everybody all the time, and nobody ever says thank you. And what happened is that changed the entire dynamic, because now her coworkers know that a simple, sincere thank you is what fills her love tank, right? Like money's important, titles are great, but for some people, words of affirmation or verbal compliments is what fills them up and makes them feel whole. So that's a good example of that.
All right.
Yeah. So
now, what happens when guys have goatees and you can't see their?
That's the interesting part. The belief on why we have beards and goatees is because we are trying to create a barrier from people getting to know us. So if you want a good example of that is why in the movie 300 do they have those really cool beards that are really long and extensive? That's the whole reason why all the characters had that in the movie.
You know why I grow mine?
Why is that?
Because my wife met me with it and she won't let me shave it.
So I have been called Uncle Fester when I shave mine off. So that's the reason I keep mine. And I tried to grow the cool 300 beard and mine looked like, can I borrow $3? Because it was not a good long beard. No,
I had to shave mine off when I had my surgery for my deviated septum. And I looked like a baby. I have a baby's face still.
Well,
even at this age. Yeah.
I had that same surgery, and I'm sure you went through this, and this is nowhere on topic, but it's a fun conversation. I felt like I could keep my wallet and my car keys in there because when they took out the packing, it was like a magic show, right? Like it kept coming. I'm like, I should just put my car keys there. I don't even need pockets.
The first couple of days, not so bad. Yeah. The 5th, 6th, and 7th day, and when it gets backed up and you can't breathe out of it anymore, it's like they got to figure a way to let that air out a little bit more. Let's move on.
But I will tell you, the first time all of the packing was out, I felt like I had felt oxygen for the first time, and it went all the way to my brain. That first breath was like, whoa.
That was like the worst. Because the problem is they have holes in them supposedly for air to get through, but they get clogged up with the blood and all the stuff, and it gets dried, and you can't breathe through them anymore. So you can only breathe through your mouth for 7 days. Yeah, it was a new experience for sure. Well, moving on, because I know we're short on time. We're good.
Oh, we're good? Okay.
Yeah.
The last feature I like to teach people, because it's a pretty good one. It's a really good indicator of how to be on the right side of building rapport when you're talking to people. And that's what I call getting a little bit lippy. So what we're going to talk about is the upper lip. And the upper lip, like I mentioned earlier, the reason I shave my goatee that you can see my lower lip is because that's your personal lip. And so when you see somebody's upper lip, it literally will tell you, should you keep things strictly business or can you talk about personal? So when you see somebody that's got a very full upper lip, and let's say you're selling them a service or a product, if you don't ask them a personal question, you can offend them because they'll feel like it was strictly transactional and they will never come back to you again. So you're not building a relationship. You may have got them a hell of a deal on something. You may have helped them with something bent over backwards. But when you only made it about the transaction or the deal or the sale or whatever, and you don't ask them some personal questions, they feel offended and they will look for somebody else for the next time that they need that service. So when you see a fuller upper lip, you can ask them things like, oh, so, who's going to, let's using mortgages again, tell me more, what sold you on about this house and what do you love about it? And what are you looking most forward to about the house? Because if you don't do those things, then they're going to feel offended. Now, if you see somebody that's just got a little bit of an upper lip, they can talk a little bit about themselves, but it's not their favorite thing. So you can start with external things like, you're working on the business, but they like to talk because they've got a little bit of that lip. It's like their favorite sports team, are they going anywhere on vacation soon? Less about them as a person, but still something that you're asking them something beyond the transaction. And versus the last type of lip is very almost like paper thin upper lip. Those are people who are not comfortable talking about themselves at all. So for example, whenever we're out, just like we were in San Diego together at Steve's event, I already know when people get excited, I wait for somebody who has a flatter upper lip to come to me and say, can you read my face? Because if somebody else points to them and says, ooh, read their, analyze their face, read their face, I know that person already feels uncomfortable because they don't like being the center of attention or talking about themselves. So I wait until they volunteer and then I'll talk to that person.
Is that why you waited for me?
Yes. I do. I will look. I'll tell you what's really interesting is I've been to 28 countries and I look in when I can tell you when I've crossed a border into a country that used to be under communist rule, a majority of the people have very flat lips because you weren't allowed to freely express yourself. And so it's very interesting because the younger generation has very fuller lips because we're learned now to express and talk. And the reason people go, well, wait a minute, how would my lips, alter based on that? Well, if you have to be quiet and you literally close your mouth, you go, and you press your lips together over time, that's what makes your lips disappear. And that is the number one reason why right now lip injections are being done not just on women, but men also. Or why did people like to do the duck face for the longest period of time? Nobody knew why. Now you guys know why. So it's crazy how much, once I learned this, like I mentioned before, I've received 9 promotions in the 20 years I've been at my company, all the way to a regional vice president of sales. And this is an introvert. This is how it changed me professionally. Now, when I go out into personal situations, I would sit in a corner until somebody talked to me previously. Now I go up and I start talking to people because I just look at a feature and I'm making it about them. And that's the real bonus that comes with a lot of this, is that when you're making about them, people feel when you're paying attention to them versus if you're on your phone or you're looking at your watch or you're looking at what's going on somewhere else. People know about what it's like to be distracted right now. But when you're paying attention to them and you're giving them your time and attention, it makes a huge difference in everybody's life. And so I gave you guys the example at the speakeasy event. If you want to practice on somebody, practice on servers, because people are dismissive to people at the hotel that check you in, servers who bring you your food, airlines. I love doing it at airlines because did you know that the people who check you at the desk can somehow control the weather, so they deserve to get yelled at by the people who are upset? Like, it's just crazy. And so I just take an extra second or two and I think, okay, what do their eyebrows say? And what does their upper lip say? And if they have a fuller upper lip, like, hey, how's your day going? Are you excited to go do anything after this? And giving them time and attention for 2 seconds. Number one, it makes their day better. But then it has the ripple effect of everybody else that they have to deal with. So let's say they have to deal with another a-hole after me. It's not as serious because I made them feel good for a second just by asking them something that their face told me I could do.
But the problem these days is that those servers still have masks on, so the people at the airports. So it's kind of hard. So basically, only have the eyebrows and the eyelids to talk. There you go. About, right.
That's what I was going to say. So you can see eyebrows and eyelids still, though, 100%.
And we haven't got into it. And you probably, I don't know. Are we where we're? This is it? Or we're going to go into nostrils and all the other stuff, or is that another show?
I like to keep it simple the first time. Okay. We can go a little bit more, but
I don't want to overwhelm people, the first time out, because it's a lot to take on. I mean, because even I've done this twice. Right. So, it's like, okay, now I get it a little bit more. Right. So, and I know a lot of women, as they get in their 50s, their lip drops. And so they go get lip raises.
Yes.
Right. That's to get to show back that they have a lip.
Yes. So I was married before, and so what my wife did quite a bit, she would have eyelash extensions put on, right? Then she would, of course, get her eyebrows done. She wore lipstick, but I went to a very prominent doctor's here in Dallas. So I live in Dallas, Texas, and there was a 50th doctor, and he was a plastic surgeon. And he thought, what would be funner than to have somebody who can analyze faces at his birthday party? And people walked in. So I've had so much Botox, you won't be able to see a single wrinkle or line on me. And I'm like, well, no, actually, I can tell this by your nostril. I can tell this by your eyebrow. I can tell this by your eyelid. And they were shocked because they thought that they just had this perfect face that was like a mannequin that would say nothing about them. But in reality, yes, you can get Botox and it'll take out some of the wrinkles because it paralyzes the muscle. But there's so many different features on your face that they all tell you a little bit something different. So kind of with where we're going, and I'll jump to the last screen here and we'll talk about features as a whole. The biggest benefit I want people to understand is when you take the time to analyze somebody's face, some people feel seen and heard for the first time in a long time. And so I don't walk in, other than when I'm teaching this, I don't walk in and go, all right, I know how to analyze faces, come sit in front of me. And it's funny because when people find out what I do, they either get in line or they want to wait their time to come talk to me, or they will completely avoid me like the plague, right? Like I got cooties like I'm in kindergarten. But to your point, foreheads, there's 3 different types of foreheads. It tells you like how do you learn information? Do you learn it fast? Do you have to learn each step one by one? We talked about the 3 basic shapes of eyebrows. That's just scratching the surface of eyebrows. And I definitely don't want to overload people, but eyebrows can tell you where somebody work best. Are they great at starting something? Are they great in the middle? Are they better at taking things to completion versus where other people fall off? It tells you like, how do they process information? And the funny thing about eyebrows are you're thinking like, why is this just patch of hair here? It's actually to stop things from coming into your eye. Well, I like to use that as an analogy because if you picture eyebrows like data racing down your forehead from the temple of your forehead down to get to your eye, eyebrows will actually tell you how fast do they process information. So the more, if your eyebrows are higher and away from your eye, then you need more time to make a decision and to kind of digest data. Versus if your eyebrow is literally sitting on top of your eye, imagine the data racing from your temple down to your eye. It can speed down your head and only has to slow down right before it gets to your eye. Well, that's how people take in information. So the closer that an eyebrow is to somebody's eye, they get information and facts very, very fast. And because they get it so fast, they tend to interrupt other people because they, not to be rude, but they get it and they're excited. And then they want to help you get there as fast as they did. And so I know if somebody's eyebrow is almost touching their eye or it's very close, they're going to interrupt me. They're not doing it to be rude. It's just how they process information, and that's how they think. So not just the eyebrow shapes, but all those different things that eyebrows can tell you. Eyes depending on if they're forward or they're recessed, tells you if somebody want to be included immediately or do they want to sit back. The angle of somebody's eyes. So if they angle up, they're an optimist. If there is no angle, they're just kind of even keel, then they just take things at face value.
Are we done with the screen? I want to be able to see this.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah.
There you go.
So I'll take this off. What I love to do is I love to grab a business card. Let me grab one out here and show you an example. Is I take a business card while I'm looking at somebody and I literally put it in front of their eye and I look and say, from the inside corner of their eye to the outside of their eye, where would the card be? So you can see like it's even keel, but if it angled up, they'd be an optimist. If it angled down, then they would be good at spotting problems, or you could say pessimist, but I like to say they're good at anticipating problems. So that's another example of what you can do. Noses, like the nose ridge tells you a little bit about something. Nostrils, the size and shape of nostrils, it tells you about them. Because if I tell everybody, take a deep breath, everybody goes through their nose. And so you and I, growing up with, I had deviated septum as well.
One side would be really good, the other side wouldn't.
Yes. I mean, as a kid, I used to watch the movies where the burglars would break into the house and put duct tape across their mouth. I thought, that ever happened to me, I'm dead. I couldn't breathe. So, but nostrils, because everybody breathes in through their nose, even like when you're frustrated, you just go, it's we take in through our nose. So nostril size actually can tell you, how does somebody attack problems? Do they believe in abundance or is it scarcity? Like, do I have enough air just for me? Like, or do I have enough air to share with everybody else? So one of the people, Courtney, that was in the Steve Sims event, had this very wide nostrils, right? Not a large nose, but nostrils that go out. And so when you look at a nose like that, you think of it like an umbrella. So the farther out the nose goes, and for people who aren't watching, I'm creating a steeple with my hands and I'm expanding it out like an umbrella. The wider it is, that's like thinking I can take care of everybody underneath this umbrella. And so the larger that the nostrils go out, the wider that they go out, that person thinks about taking care of other people. So they make great leaders because there's several other features on their face, but that's saying I'm here to take care of people at the exact same time. And then you can tell cheeks are like gas gauges.
All right, I think that's too much, man.
Totally fine. Like I said, I can do this all day. So yeah.
All right, you got 2 more minutes.
Yeah.
Then we can bring it all together, talk about some other things. All right.
Sure. I think we hit the major ones that people should pay attention to, because eyebrows, you can see from a distance, you can see from sunglasses. An interesting fact is we pick our glasses because they kind of match eyebrows to a degree. So if you look at most people, their glasses or choice in sunglasses match their eyebrows. Right. But the main points of what we talked about are the most important, in my opinion, when you first get to analyze faces, or if you want to help build rapport with people. So start with the eyebrow, then look at the eyelid, then look down at the upper lip. And that'll tell you enough of just, how do I talk that person's language? So I use it, and this is just an analogy, the story I like to end with. I recently went to a wedding in Georgia, and it was right across the Florida-Georgia line at Jekyll Island. And when we were there at the server at the wedding, I noticed that the server had a name tag that said he was from Hungary. And I've been to Bulgaria, and to Budapest, so I knew some Hungarian. And I went and looked up my phone because I always kept basic phrases: good morning, good evening, good day, please, thank you. Most importantly, where's the bathroom, and how do I get the check, right? Right. And so the server came by and he filled up my wine glass, and I said,
"That's my Spanish, man."
Yeah, you got to have all that in Spanish, right? Yeah. But yeah, the guy came by and I said, "Köszönöm," and that's thank you in Hungarian. He stopped and he said, "You know Hungarian?" I said, "Well, I've been to Budapest, so yeah, I learned to speak Hungarian." Guess whose wine glass was never empty the rest of the time, and whose table got the best service? Because all of a sudden he told somebody else to come over, and so she had a Hungarian too. And I'm like, "Oh, Köszönöm." Taking that extra second to say something in their language changed not just my experience that night. Everybody at my table got the best service the entire time, and it made somebody else happy. And that's exactly what learning to analyze or read somebody's face does, is you're taking an extra few seconds to focus on somebody else, and it changes the dynamic for not just you, but everybody else at the exact same time. So that's what I like to end with.
Well, no, I'm thinking finally we get back to thinking about other people, not just ourselves, right?
100%.
Talking to them. Yeah. So I mean, the biggest problem, I think, for the longest time, we're all about us. We're not thinking about how do I help work with this other person, or how do I at work I work with this other person, or as an employee. The one thing I liked, though, through the whole process was the fact you're talking about eyebrows, how they deal with it, like the fuller in the beginning and thinner at the end, or thin, all the different ones, and how that works. Can you quickly go through that real quick? Because that was what I thought was. So this way, when I hire somebody, I look, are they going to finish the job all the way through? Nope, you're out of here.
So I am a good example. So think of eyebrows, and I'm pointing for people who are listening in. If you go from the nose out to the end of the eyebrow, the thickness tells you what parts are they better at. So a majority of people are great and have these little thick beginnings of their eyebrow, and then they start to taper off as they go. Now, part of that is a common threading style right now in women's eyebrows, but it's not always. If you look, women have different degrees of thickness. So what you think of is the thickness of an eyebrow tells you where they best are suited and where their work style is. So you may have somebody who's thick all the way from the beginning to the end, then that's somebody who is great at starting things, can pick something up in the middle, and will take it all the way to completion. But if you meet somebody that's very thick in the beginning and then it thins out, that's somebody who's great at starting something. So for example, they can plan a party, but they're not gonna be the one helping to set up for the party. They're just good at coming up with the ideas, and then they move on and get bored. So we talked with Mohawk Matt, right? And that's what he said. His eyebrows are very thick in the beginning, and then they thin out. He said, man, you have no idea. I even like talking to people, and all of a sudden I just lose attention. I start focusing on something else. So he's a perfect example of that. And then somebody else says there, Tab's eyebrows were actually thickest like towards the end. And so I went up to Tab and I said, let me guess, with you like that other people start things, but that's not your sweet spot. You like understanding once the process gets going, taking control of that project and making sure that it gets completed and that everything's done right. And, you cross the I's and dot the T's and everything. He's like, yeah, that's it. So you can literally look at somebody and understand what's their best work style and what do you want to trust them with. So let's say, for example, if there's a customer that I have to follow up with, if they have a very that's thick in the beginning and thins out over time, I better follow up with that person very fast. Don't wait a whole lot of time, or if they've already gotten bored and moved on and may have started talking to a competitor already, even though they've already given them all that information, because that's how they process information. Versus if somebody's thicker, then I know I can give them a little bit more time. But I'll give you a good example. Doing follow-up training on something. So if somebody's bought your product and they've got a thick that goes to thin very fast, you need to follow up with training, questions, things immediately. Don't wait 60, 90 days, because they'll move on and then they're mad at you for their lack of follow through. But if you see that about them and you go, okay, well, their eyes go thin, or eyelids go thin fairly quick, then you need to follow up immediately with them. So what do they call onboarding a customer? I would do that very fast. So does that help answer?
Yeah, because there's also one that goes all the way through, right? That shows like if it's thicker in the beginning and thinner and then thicker. Is there any of that, or is there just those two?
Oh, you would be amazed what eyebrows show. So, for example, if I ever said lined up some people, and if everybody knows who Frida is, the artist, right? She had the unibrow. Right. When you think unibrow, what do you immediately think of? Like somebody who's very intelligent, right? So they may have a pocket protector, they may not. Well, what that's actually a reflection of is that it's combining the left side and the right side of the brain, because the eyebrows never stop. And they've actually shown studies that if you have a unibrow and you shave it and you add meditation to your cycle, you actually calm down, your brain slows down. But it's like a continuous thought is etched into your brain, and you just can't stop thinking. And literally just by shaving that off, people found better results from it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of information that you've shown us today and talked to us about. I mean, when I first heard this, I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is amazing. And and again, my wife's like, I don't believe it. But anyway, I'll make sure she watches this or listens to this. Or, she's supposed to. Are you going to Austin?
Yeah, right? I will be there in Austin.
Yeah, so will I. So if anybody's listening here and don't know about Steve D. Sims, go check him out. He does speakeasies 3 times a year. They're 2 days somewhere, and it's amazing. You learn so much, get to meet. And for me, it's meeting yes, you meet good speakers, but it's all the other people in the audience that I like to meet and get to know them, because anybody in the audience could be up on stage.
It's a support structure for sure. That was my first one. And for what you kind of didn't tell people is they don't know where the venue is going to be and they don't know who the speakers are. Right. And so I sat in there as an attendee until I got pulled up to speak. But what I noticed as being my first event, the camaraderie and the level of support that everybody who's been there before had with each other, it was more like a family reunion than it was coming to just listen to speakers. It was amazing. That's why I signed up immediately. As soon as we're done, they said, all right, the next one's going to be an awesome. I'm like, all right, done. Already paid for it. I'll be there.
And probably I'd say probably 50% of the people were there again. The rest of them are all new. So it changes. I mean, and when we were in, and then this, we shouldn't even be talking about this on here, but anyway, when we were in the last one, I would say probably only 10 people or less than that was from repeaters. Oh. So yeah, so it's all changed.
Yeah.
But it's amazing what you learn, just like what we did today, what we learned from Brian. Brian, I want to thank you again for coming on today. And if you want to find Brian, just go online to subtleskills.com and you'll be able to find everything about him. And you can email him at brian@subtleskills.com.
Yep.
In case they didn't know.
Instagram, Subtle Skills too.
Yeah.
So
just in case they didn't know how to spell, right? Yeah, we do deal with Steve, so not everybody knows how to spell. And again, I want to thank you for joining us today on Inner Edison. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and learned from Brian what people are saying with their face. And if you like this, please like, share, and subscribe. And again, Brian, thank you so much for being here today.
Appreciate it.